Hi, I'm Ash and welcome to this video where we are looking at a light wind specialised wingboard. This is the board that I had designed and built by Swift Foiling to my specifications after testing various boards, some of which you can see on this channel. The result of all that testing was I got an idea as to exactly what I was looking for in a light wind wingboard, and the results are what you see on your screen now. In this video I'm going to go over the basic design and then go into some detail about some of the decisions that were made in completing the design and where those decisions originated. The basic specification of this board is that it is 6'6" long by 19 inches wide and has a volume of 92 litres. The starting point of this design was the width. I had tried 20-inch boards and I'd also tried 18-inch boards. Whilst I was perfectly comfortable on the 20-inch boards I tried, which were 6'4" and 6'10" long, I felt narrower as possible. This led to testing two 6' by 18-inch boards. After riding those boards, I felt 18-inch changed my stance a little too much, but didn't actually change light wind performance massively over the 20-inch boards I had been riding. So I opted to go in the middle at 19 inches. But we will see there is more to this in the design, which I'll come into later. I also realised from testing that in choppy conditions the extra length really helps. 6' 10-inch boards were definitely better than 6' boards in these conditions. Additionally, the extra length also added directionality of the board off the foil. What I mean by this is that the length stops the board drifting downwind and it just tends to go where you point it when you're off the foil. This means that in light winds off foil you can still make progress upwind relatively easily, which is perfect if the wind suddenly drops to sub-foiling strengths, which is more likely in light wind conditions. This particular characteristic was far less prevalent in 6' and under boards, and the shorter you went, the less of this you got and the more you tended to just drift downwind. So this set the spec for something over 6' and 19 inches wide. What actually ended up setting the length was how thick I wanted the board and the volume I wanted. I did not want the board to be more than 6 inches thick. This is because the thicker the board, the more distance there is between your feet and the mast plate, and this affects the feel of the foil. Thinner always feels more natural and reactive. I also wanted about 10 litres of positive volume. I weigh 82 kilograms, so 92 litres was the target. These two elements combined, 92 litres of volume and less than 6 inches thick, led to the board needing to be 6 inches long to meet my specifications. The next design element was the bottom shape of the board. During testing I had ridden a 6'4" flat bottomed planing hull and a 6'10" more displacement orientated hull. Of the two, I preferred the displacement hull as it seemed to sit better in the water, was less tippy in side chop, and I felt it cut through chop better when pumping onto foil. So my next requirement was a displacement style hull with no double concave at the front, because it's just not necessary on a long board like this. And I wanted it tapering to a point at the rear, sometimes referred to as a pintail or a diamond tail. Lastly, I wanted a progressive bevel, so the front of the board had a more beveled rail and this hardened more towards the rear. The reason for this was again I'd ridden a beveled rail board in testing and preferred it to hard rails as they seem to catch side chop much more. Secondly, by having a beveled rail, it narrowed the hole further. So on the underside, as I gained speed and the board rose up, it would effectively become thinner and more efficient. It also meant the board sliced through chop more effectively as it got thinner the more speed I gained. This covers the underside. If we now go to the deck, we have a very shallow concave, which is mostly removed by the deck pad. This was something we learned from the small 18-inch boards, which had a much deeper concave. The problem with a concave deck is that the concave narrows the board width. On a 19-inch board you don't want to be doing that, as the board is already very narrow. So the deck concave was made smaller, so the deck was basically flat once you added the deck pad. This maximises deck width and stops your stance from being unnecessarily narrowed. Lastly, I added both front and rear foot strap inserts. This is because despite being a 6'6" board, this is a swift foiling carbon Integra construction and therefore perfectly capable of jumping, so full straps are added. I have jumped the board, and although a bit longer and harder to control than a short board in the air, it does jump very well. So with all that said, does it actually work as I hoped or expected as a light wind wingboard? The answer to this is absolutely. I personally absolutely love it. It's a light wind weapon and I don't think I would change anything about it. This leads me on to the current trends and hype in board design, which, unless you've been living under a rock, you'll know is the advent of the mid-length board. These are boards that are around 5 foot 8 inches to 6 foot long and usually 90 to 100 litres, width around 21 inches. These are being touted as the new light wind boards. The question is, would you pick one of these for light wind performance over something like what I have designed and built with the help of swift foiling? The answer to this is, if you can only have one board and you want it to have some light wind capability, then yes, why not? It will have compromises. It is neither a long or short board. It won't track off foil like a longer board, and the widths are designed to be a bit better in light wind, but also more forgiving for beginners, i.e. not tippy on the roll axis. In light winds, my design of board will be on foil earlier. It will track better off foil and it will be less effort to pump onto foil. I'll also be able to use both smaller wings and smaller foils than someone using one of these new mid-length boards. However, my solution is a 2-board quiver solution. When the wind gets stronger, I want to be on a much smaller board, whereas with a mid-length you just sail the same board in all conditions because it is already a smaller board, although not as small as the board that I would be sailing in much stronger wind conditions. If you only want to buy one board, then that is fine, but if you want to maximise light wind and strong wind performance, then a 2-board quiver is the right solution. I hope this overview has been interesting. I've only really briefly covered the design specifications, and if you wanted to build the same board as you see here, then Swift Foiling have it on file and you can customise it to your own specifications. I'll see you on the next video.